So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. Today's conversation is titled From Survival to Stability and is leaving the alley behind. That's what we're going to talk about. The title is intentional. When I say the alley, I'm talking about hidden spaces where many of us learn how to survive. Many of us learn how to survive prison cells, under-resourced neighborhoods, unstable homes, systems that taught us to stay guarded, move strategically, and expect very little grace. In the alley, survival is intelligence, it's hyper-awareness, it keeps you safe, silence protects you, distrust can be wisdom, reacting quickly can mean our staying alive. Those skills are not signs of dysfunction, they're adaptations. But the problem is this, the very skills that keep you alive in hidden spaces often clash with the expectations of what we call the street, which is mainstream society, institutions, working places, courtrooms, places of public accountability. On the mainstream street, you're expected to trust systems that may have harmed you. You're expected to regulate emotions that were shaped under pressure. You're expected to navigate structures that were never designed with your survival story in mind. So the question becomes, are we asking people to leave the alley without building a bridge to the mainstream street? You guys are going to be great for answering these questions because all the time you worked in the environments we work, you've done this work for decades. So too often, sentencing and supervision focus on punishment without addressing root causes of trauma, poverty, instability, untreated mental health needs, and broken educational pathways. We penalize the behavior without examining the environment that produced it. And then we're surprised when stability don't magically appear. Today is not about blaming individuals or institutions. It's about understanding the gap between survival and stability and asking what it truly takes to move from one to the other. Because survival is about getting through the day. Stability is about building a life. And if we're serious about justice reform, we have to talk honestly about both. So let us begin. I'm going to ask each one of you which want to go first. Introduce yourself, a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go into the question and discuss this.
My name is Stanley Howard. I'm a prisoner rights advocate here at Uptown People's Law Center. Also currently with the Chicago Torture Memorial Foundation. And I am here still doing the work that I've been doing,
Oh, that was it?
Yeah.
I didn't know Stanley was all the way done. He usually has one last anecdotal thing. My name is James Soto. Most people know me as Jimmy. I served 42 years wrongfully convicted. While inside, I did a number of things organizing, which we'll probably get into. But since I've been out here, I lead a campaign called Build Communities Not Prisons in Illinois. I also work with Beyond Prisons, No New Prisons. I work with Parole Illinois. I currently am a paralegal at the Pritzker School of Law at Northwestern, and I am a JD candidate to be starting law school in the fall. I also continue to try to organize. I'm organizing right now two other reentry organizations, one with which is called the Latino Reentry and Reintegration Service, which is attached to a larger coalition, which is Frente Unidos, which is the United Front, and then the last thing is with ABC Reentry. So I'm just going to leave it there, and I'm going to pass it over to Brian.
All right, hi everybody. Brian Bills, Future Leadership Apprentice at Restore Justice. Also the Executive Director of Mud Theater Project. I am, in my capacity as a worker here, run 2 reentry programs, Return to Citizens Network, where we focus on socializing over, we feel like that's a very important part of reentry, workforce development, digital literacy, All those things are important calls. Also supervise a reentry program under Mud Theater, and we focus on therapeutic issues. We focus on returning to your family, to your parents, and starting relationships when you get out. So often while we're incarcerated, we kind of lock our emotions away. And sometimes when you get into these new relationships, it's volatile to not be able to access and express yourself. So we focus on that on our reentry and love program. Also, I'm the trainer for peer education inside for Chicago Votes, and do a lot of other work alongside that with my friends here.
I appreciate you guys coming. So here comes the questions. I'm going to ask Jimmy to answer the first question. When we talk about, to Jimmy, I'm asking, when we talk about the alley, what do we really mean?
To me, the alley is really just like a metaphor, not necessarily saying that you are hanging out in the alley per se, although some of us did use alleys to cut in and out when things were getting a little crazy on the streets. But why I say I look at it as a metaphor, it's a metaphor to, like you said, the hidden trauma that so many of us has. I firmly know from experience by talking to thousands of people in there that they usually come even before they were arrested for the offense that they eventually were convicted of. They had pre-existing trauma, and it comes in many, many forms. So that's one thing. The other thing is the violence. It's another way that people shelter themselves away from violence. The alley is a way for you to navigate away from the violence. Nobody's really looking for the violence. And like you said, they become a product of their environment. This is very much in line with my understudies when they talked about, we took a criminology class, which asked the question why, or the causation of the actual behavior, antisocial behavior. The antisocial behavior usually starts in the adolescent years, where it's simple as I don't want to keep going academic, but I'm going to go academic, and that is this French psychologist studied children, and his name was Piaget, and they showed how just in a setting, a child will get hit, they're going to respond with hitting. So a lot of things are reactionary, but those are learned behavior, whether it's through the culture, whether it's through the environment, as Ronnie pointed out, which is oftentimes, if not in the home, it's in the neighborhoods. So the alley is these things that children have to navigate when they're young, from everything from the trauma that they may experience, and then also the violence. And so that's what I look at as the
alley.
We talk about when we talk about the alley.
Okay, just to mention, all that is all true. The way I looked at it when I was thinking about this was because all of us are incarceral impacted, and while we were in the system, first of all, I came through the alleys as I grew up and didn't get into the mainstream of life. And then when we went into the system, or I ended up in the system, then we made like a hands-off disassociation to the guards. So you can't talk to them, you can't be with them. So myself purposely denied myself getting into the mainstream of the stuff that was going on, and that's when this metaphor.
Yeah, but you're right. Those learned behaviors that translated when we all got incarcerated. So those same things came into play, and they affected the way people would interact socially and or officially with officials. In other words, you had to know how to conduct yourself as a person. But a lot of people came in there lacking those skills, and that's what caused a lot of tension and friction and conflict.
Brian, I want to ask you, as far as this goes, how do those same survival skills create friction? Because you're into the restored justice and some kind of, like you said, reentry training and all that. So how does those same survival skills we learn from the alleys create friction once someone tries to re-enter into the mainstream system, like having a job, trying to buy a house out in the front, So what's your take on that?
Yeah, first I just want to expand a little bit about what Jimmy explained. My view of the alley from you is, what we grew up at is from disinvestment communities that were set up to lead us into incarceration. So it's sort of like the beginning of the classroom. prison pipeline. But when you get out, the behaviors that we had to learn to navigate the prison system sometimes hold us back out here as we start going to the workforce. Because we lack a lot of training, a lot of skills, and our attitudes are a little different. While inside, we have to be hyper aggressive to just get a phone call, or we run into the yard to get to the 2 or 3 sets of dumbbells that's supposed to be shared with 200 other people, or we feel like we get in the line to go to something we need, like commissary, and we get there and they shut the door, says it's over with. So being exposed to just happen to live hyper aggressive, and then it doesn't translate to the workforce out here. You have to learn how to level set. So when you come into workforce spaces, to get along with people who haven't experienced that, who take that aggressive approach that we sometimes have, and don't understand why we respond that way. One other aspect about it, I think, is there's always this clock in our head when we out here coming to workspaces. I deal with a lot of people when they first get out, and particularly while they're in work release, and you rushing to get from one place to another. You think about, I got to be back, so I got to say everything, I got to do everything, I got to express everything before my time is up. Clock, 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 clock. We programmed to live that way, and that doesn't translate well in the workspaces.
Yeah, I understand. That's a good way to look at it. So the friction that, in a sense, what I came into was bringing home still from being from the streetwise, then going inside, and I was surrounded with that kind of environment, and my years were, as well as you guys' years, unlocking the mindsets of the people around us to let go of that, to venture into education, to venture into doing better. But still, since I've been home and coming back into the mainstream, sometimes my trigger, whatever it is, that a family member can do it. And Brian, you mentioned it when you were talking about how to re-navigate your family, re-navigate relationships. So sometimes I'll just speak out real fast, like, I heard you, or I don't mean to do it, but I catch myself with that. So that's the friction that I see when I'm confronted with something that, even when I first came going to the grocery store, and kept saying, do you have your number with this? No, I don't. Do you have that? And I didn't know what was going on. I'm like, can I just give you this money? That's all I knew how to do from a child. Can I give you this money and can I get that product? So I don't know about putting my name in there, and I don't know about that. No, I don't have that. And then as they kept on, but it's a sale and it's better, I like got even more. No, I'm good already. All right already. And I'm still learning to cultivate and shake off or understand better myself of that mentality, as you said. So when you speak, Stanley, if you feel you want to chime in on something that Jimmy spoke about or something that Brian spoke about, because as with the way we're operating this, feel free to do so. But I want to ask you, the question I want to ask you is about what is misunderstood about people who operate in survival mode, and take it from there.
Like my brother Brian and Jimmy, I grew up literally in the alley between 51st and 50th, Calumet and Prairie up on the L. That was my first, from the time I was born till I was about 7, 8 years old. But growing up in what we call the hood, I lived around, experienced, and was exposed to gambling, drug dealing, prostitution, pimps, robberies. And, we had our place robbed a couple of times at gunpoint. And, to come up in that particular place, especially with the violence, and the gangs, so-called gangs, my young brain was geared towards survival mode without even knowing it, and trying to navigate around a neighborhood, whereas there's danger that's lurking all around you. So when you enter prison, you already preconditioned to be able to be in survival mode. And at a drop of a dime, you always able to react to protect yourself. My first experience with prison was not really prison, it was death row. which put me in extreme is survival mode.
Mm.
And, having these behaviors, institutionalized behaviors, and to bring that out into the streets, like my brother Brian was just saying, it's not inducing into how you actually have to live out here. And the re-entry in love that they are having is not just with, spouses. You have relationships with your mom, your brother, your sister, your cousin, and just society in general. And sometimes it's hard to deal with that. Like here at Uptown People's Law Center with some of my coworkers, it's kind of hard for me to even, with these antisocial behaviors, to mingle freely and just open up to be able, whereas they're able to understand who I am and what I'm going through and been through. This is why counseling is so important. Not only did I take anger management, I have personal counseling also, and I had marriage counseling. So I'm still trying to unpack a lot of this. And unpacking this is very important. So to answer your question, it's tough. It's tough because the system don't prepare you for release. Not during the first 30, 35 years of my incarceration. I've done 16 years on death row and 39 years of complete incarceration continuously. And there was no preparing for this. To get out here into this brand new world where there's computers everywhere, there's no computer training.
Yeah, I understand that. So as far as in my situation about that, I look at the misunderstanding. The way I see it is, the marginalization, I would call it, or the status quo that they didn't want. I won't say they, but it was like I couldn't be unlocked from the outside people's point of view. You can't be unlocked. You're street bound all the way around. You're that, and they held me in that mindset. I don't care how many stacks of credentials I had. Whatever I brought. So that was the misunderstanding about me. And when I ask, in each of your experiences, does sentencing focus more on punishment than on root cause? What's your
I think I'll take that on first. Absolutely not. Sentencing does not, it has no rehabilitative potential. So punitive measures or policies become at the forefront. In other words, they want you to be incapacitated and serve the retribution for the crime that you're alleged to have committed. The problem is that they take away from one component. What makes it both morally or philosophically and legally acceptable in a modern civilized society are four tenets. Our Supreme Court has never deviated from this, which is, as I said, incapacitation, retribution, deterrence, and rehabilitation. So a lot of the focus to pass these natural life without parole and de facto life sentences, the TIS, truth in sentencing, and the mandatory add-ons, is because they say it acts as a deterrence. Well, we know that that is a fallacy, but regardless, it's a tenet. The last one, rehabilitation, gets out the window. I know you spoke about your personal journey, Ronnie, and how you had accumulated. I read that opinion, appellate court opinion, backwards and forwards, where they said that you couldn't do anymore. There was nothing more that you could do to show you were quote unquote rehabilitated, or you weren't the person that they labeled you as. They totally disregarded the human potential for transformation, for evolving into a more mature and considerate and thoughtful person. They look at you as only being the crime in and of itself, and I think that's a flaw, and it takes away from why we're able to do what we do when it comes down to policy. Here in Illinois, we know we don't have parole, so once you're exhausted your appeals and your post-conviction, your federal hape, you're basically out there, and you have to hope that there is some type of legislative change. So I say that to say that, unless an individual, and it's always the case, has the motivation to change themselves, the system offers some programming, but it's a self journey, that they do it. And, unfortunately, some people fall through the cracks. And yeah, because being in an abnormal setting for decades is not, we normalize things that are abnormal, things that we shouldn't accept become normal to us, and that
Yeah.
shouldn't be the case. And when we come out, we are fractured and damaged. So, um, long-term sentencing, naturalized sentencing, it does not do anything but harm the person. It is just perpetuating a cycle of harm.
I'm gonna let these guys be unmuted, but from what you were saying right there, I started thinking about that. It was people like us that looked at the root causes of the people behind us, that we were the ones that had compassion to, when a brother would act up, to pull him over and say, hey man, what is it? And get to know him on a personal level, and not so much like the system, just, for the crime, that we were actually the ones to help people transforming their mindsets, and we repeatedly done that, and we were successful at it. So I'm gonna leave either one of you to follow in.
Yeah, like my brother Jimmy was just saying, it's a self journey. It's not like the system is giving you these avenues in order to be able to help you. And some of the resources are so limited, only very few is able to even access it. And, I strongly believe that these punitive measures that they take with these long sentences, it's just something to feed the public, especially during this war on crime and war on drugs. It was just something to feed the public to make it seem like that they was tough on crime. When in reality, we do know that individuals have the capacity for change. Now, a lot of things that people are accused of allegedly had been allegedly had done. A lot of the time, people grow out of stuff. People are able to change, but the system, especially here in Illinois, do not recognize that possibility. And I was once sentenced to, whereas not only did they say I was a danger to society, but I was also a danger to the prison population. So where did that leave me for the first 16 years of my incarceration? Nowhere. And the same way when I got off of death row and into the prison general population, there was nothing there for me. I had to seek it out on my own and practically beg to be educated. And I mean, if the system was true about that tenet that Jimmy was just referring to about rehabilitation, they would put more funding into that to make sure that when people are released, they have the ability to be able to be successful citizens, if you will.
Restored.
I want to
And
add
to be,
something before Brian makes a comment, and that is that it flies in the face of our own state constitution, Article 1, Section 11, of restoring a person to useful citizenship. So I'll let you go now, Brian.
There you go.
Yeah, I think, you got to look back a little bit prior to 1978 when there was parole. You look at the rate of people in prison, the numbers were dramatically less than they are now. But it's something in our society that just made us think that, the longer you sentence, the harsher the conditions, the better it is for society. But if you just look at this panel, there's proof of that. We debunk it on its face. We all had super long sentences, and we got out before they sentenced us to do. And the kind of work that we're doing just proves that people are redeemable. And again, history teaches us when you had parole for everybody in the system, crime rates were dramatically reduced. It's just society has been tricked, has kind of been fooled to think that you can punish your way out of societal ills. When you gotta, like again, what Ronnie was saying, we were our brother's keeper on the inside. We were the ones creating programs. We were the ones recognizing the humanity in each of us. And we were all, at some time, in our lowest points, and had our brothers on the inside pick us up. And we bring that same aspect out here now. That's why we do this work. But yeah, I think it's starting to come full circle, and we're leading the way to say, hey, let's stop all this foolish sentencing stuff. Let's start treating people like people, and just get our community and the people in our community back to where we're welcome back, and that we become instruments of change in the community.
There you go. Restoration. So the next question, all three of you guys, am asking what structural barriers make it difficult to transition from that survival to stability? Stability being in the mainstream, the survival being where I would put myself instead of telling your story, let you tell your own story. So that's the question, what structural barriers,
Well, let me start with that one right quick. I'm just going to lay a few out real quickly. Housing, coming out of prison and not having a credit history. And it's hard to get housing for anyone to trust you to rent, even though I tried to give a landlord 6 months in advance, they wouldn't even take it. And then that's access, that's credit history. Credit history, right now, you have to have a credit history to essentially establish yourself financially. And just getting a bank account was really difficult. And, so those are structural barriers. And I'm quite sure Jimmy and Stanley have quite a few more to lead, to join this conversation with.
Those are deep by itself. Go ahead.
I mean, yeah, I didn't have, fortunately, I was managed to save a little money and I had you can't have a bank account in your name because they'll try to tax you for your incarceration. But I had a little money I saved up in the bank. But yes, I had the credit problem. Yes, right now I'm experiencing the leasing problem that we are out of there. I can even tell you one of my friends, uh, Robert Almodovar, he's already got his compensation from the city and he wanted to just rent a condo and they wouldn't let him do it because within the real estate apps that they have available, the information was still in there that he was convicted. And then when he finally found that out, so now there's a whole group of exonerees. I don't know if you might want to join too, Brian, but that's just one way. Housing, we're excluded from housing. It doesn't matter whether you're guilty or innocent when you get out here. You're excluded because you were once in the system, and so the system is designed for exclusivity to keep you out of places and things. So my difficulty was I didn't have my birth certificate, my social security card. And so it's hard to go into a place and say you are who you are and you don't have anything to show for it. But fortunately, I had people help me and I managed to get there. So there's those things as simple as IDs that you need when you get a check or whatever, was probably a 2 month odyssey for me. Um, the other thing that I'll say that we're excluded out of it, regardless is the workforce. Sure, you may be exonerated, but guess what? What's your work history? When's the last time you worked? I'm gonna tell them I worked in a law library, I worked in hospice, the M&M mechanical maintenance shop. That means nothing. They want to know what is your work history. And so unless you know somebody that can get you in or you know them personally or a friend of a friend, employment can be very difficult and a stable employment, there's a lot of part-time positions for us, but getting a full-time position with full benefits,
Yeah.
not easy.
Yeah, hard to do. Stanley?
I experienced something like that myself. Fortunately, I have my best friend, which is my sister. I remember you said that many times yourself, Ronnie, during your incarceration, that your sister was your best friend, your everything. Lucky my sister was my best friend also. And, I had a lot of help while I was on the inside, so I was able to have a credit history before I got out. And I had a bank account before I got out. Even with all of that, and when I got out, I had my own home. So I didn't have to struggle and crawl like a lot of people did, but I still had those structural barriers was in place. I consider myself a nice or a modest paralegal on the inside. So when I tried to get employment, I was rejected 3 times because I didn't have the computer skills in order to be a paralegal on this side of the wall. So it was almost like what my brother Jimmy was just saying. It was because I knew somebody that knew somebody that landed me an opportunity to be interviewed by Allen Mills. And at that same time, I was taking a one-on-one course at 101 Chicago on 46 and King Drive. And plus, I was getting personally tutored by one of Professor Alice Kim's students to try to bring me up a little bit. And fortunate enough, I was able to have some skills to be able to land a job. Now, nobody teach me about, on the inside, you have your prison medical system is so bad that a lot of us get out, we have health issues that we have to deal with and try to reverse what was happening on the inside. So to get a primary position, it's really tough. It's hard. I wasn't prepared. I didn't know how to go through all of this. So not only employment, housing, medical, I mean, where you gonna get health insurance from? I mean, it's tough. And if you don't have someone to assist you through this process, you are aimed, and the system is designed to help you go back.
It's a lot of structural barriers. I'm glad you guys mentioned them. I'm glad the audience can hear some of that stuff. So the next question is, this is the last question. How do institutions unintentionally, you just said everything's intentionally, but how do institutions unintentionally reinforce survival behaviors?
You have this theory, and it's called carceral humanism. And within carceral humanism, it says that people come in, let's say volunteers, whether it's the chapel, whether it's educational and other things, they come in with the intent to do something good. But in essence, it kind of fuels the carceral objective in that they're only helping you in the moment. Like there isn't that long-term help that you're seeking. Yes, you might get spiritual guidance in the chapel. You may have that there, but what is it really doing to promote you to get quote unquote released? So yeah, I mean, they come in with a lot of good intentions and they wind up becoming even part of the system. And in fact, the theory goes on to say that some of them become like administrative in and of themselves, like, hey, don't don't take this pen, don't do this, don't talk loud. That suddenly they are becoming with their own set of rules, which is what the oppressive system does. And that translate out here with people that are trying to help you, but in fact, their help can sometimes be exploitative. Like, hey, come over here and do this panel and talk to these people. But we're readdressing, or we're getting triggered by our trauma at the cost of them supposedly getting our messages out. I'm not saying in this setting here, this is strictly volunteer. What I'm saying is that can happen. That does happen where people will become unintentionally exploitative of your trauma in order to convey that there needs to be some type of change.
It's hard to speak this language. Anything?
Yeah, I go with one that was really big in my incarceration. There is a concerted effort to squash any kind of leadership, and so I mean, you literally can be punished for exuding or providing leadership in your community. And when you have that done to you over and over and over again, it's really hard to like use the phrase that you use, Ronnie, unlock it when you get out here. It makes you timid. It makes you, I'm gonna use the real word, afraid to step out there. And I met like a lot of great guys inside who had like just natural leadership ability. And to see them, now years later out here, never having an opportunity to use it. Fortunately, we've been given platforms and hired into organizations that allow us to exemplify that leadership out here. But whether intentionally or unintentionally, I think I lean toward intentionally. There was a concerted effort to make sure that no leaders were returning back to the community.
Yeah, they punished anytime you stood up, they would punish. So I remember a lot of that. So anything, Stanley?
Yes. Well, it's a lot there. It's a lot there. We could talk for weeks about this. I want to chime in on what the system actually does. They want you to live in a barbaric setting. They treat you with there's inhumane conditions everywhere. I'll give you one example that always hurt the heck out of me about a barbaric setting. They want you to be able to pull down your pants and defecate in front of others. They script search you constantly naked in front of many other people. I always had a problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
Because it don't protect your humanity. I also have a problem with the way incarceration works, period. They use extreme isolation and solitary confinement as a punishment. And the prison setting itself is a way of isolating you from society. They are literally torturing people on the inside while we speak right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that causes mutilation, agitation, irritation, frustration, depression. You can go up and down the list. There are so many guys that's dealing with so many mental issues that when they call the Met line, it looked like a child line or yard line going out the door.
You seen it.
Because they're closing all these mental health centers on the inside, and when you come on the outside, then you come on the inside, it makes it worse. So they treat you barbarically and inhumanely, but then they release you and expect for you to be able to unlock that your turn yourself. All of a sudden, you're supposed to forget about how you was just treated barbarically. Now you're supposed to be civil now.
Mm-hmm.
How do that work? How do you be treated barbarically for 30-some years, 40-some years, then all of a sudden open the door and say, okay, go live in a civil society, be civil in this civilization? It don't work like that.
It sounds like Brian said, more intentional than unintentional. So we're getting ready to close. We got about a couple minutes left, but I appreciate all those confirmations of what it really means of navigating in one place versus the other place. You know, and you guys working in the reentry aspect. You know, I just want to thank you guys for coming today. Also for being transparent while speaking about lived experience, you know, that you experience or seen other people experience. And also I'd like to thank you for your resilience that you haven't stopped helping brothers and sisters to cross over that bridge from, you know, survival, which we call alley mode, to the navigation mode, you know, which is the street, the mainstream society life. So I appreciate you guys coming, as Jimmy says, volunteering. And I believe we did a great deed, and people are going to love hearing these words. So have a great day.
I just have one thing before, as we're closing out, and that is that each and every one of you that I know personally had that growth, that personal change in there, and they imparted what their experience, their knowledge to the younger people around them or to their peers around them. In other words, like Brian with Mud Theater that you created in there, when they wouldn't give you a way that you could put, you know, drama into formally, you did it informally, and then they took it over, and then they wanted to own it. Stanley with you, legal education. You, Ronnie, both with basic learning, you know, and emphasizing education and vocational skills. And then me, like with the JCs and other things. So, you know, I think we came in there having already done our transformation and then imparting it onto the other. And now we're going to impart it onto the general public.
So I would like our audience to, what we call to action, you know, what can we do about it? So I would advise all listeners to get your hands on the toolkit that we have here at Illinois Prison Project. It's called Freedom Series. You know, it provides educational materials designed to support personal growth, empowerment for people returning home from prison. It points out how to better navigate the realities faced in the real world, which we identified as the streets. It covers topics such as, you know, obtaining crucial documents, registry guidelines, utilizing resources, thawing out the emotional aspect of what we have to go through, financial literacy. So we need to continue to educate, and that's what you guys are doing. We need to continue to educate what it means to navigate in the real world versus the alleys. And the Freedom Series is a great toolkit to help individuals cross over from survival mode to navigation mode.